Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com.
Selling a loan or a debt to a third party. All those involved in business dealings and investments, in borrowing money and lending money, may be faced with a situation in which they would like to sell this debt or loan to a third party, thereby acquiring liquid cash at the current moment and not wait for the debt to be paid up. Now, while people may think this only applies to big businessmen, in truth this may apply to every individual who was given a check as payment for a product or any case of the like in which a check was written to him, and the check is post-dated and he would like to get cash now, so he would like to sell the check to another individual and receive liquid cash at the current moment. This is commonly done in check cashing services and in essence is the same as selling a debt. The two issues that come up when you would like to sell a debt to another individual is, number one, according to the laws of kinyanim, is it possible for a debt to be sold? I know I can sell a product, I know I can sell a home, but can I sell a debt? Is it something sellable according to halacha? And the second question is, does doing so transgress any of the Ribis laws? For example, if I was given a post-dated check for $100, and I would like the $100 today, and I go over to my neighbor and said, listen, I'll give you a deal. Give me $90 now, and you can then cash in this check for $100 in a week from now. Is that considered Ribis? I got now 90 and he's getting 100. It's as if for the fact that he lent me $90, I am then paying him back $100, which is Ribis. So these are the questions that are applicable in this case. And the halacha is as follows. The good news is that whenever the buyer or seller of the debt is a Gentile, being that there is no Ribis prohibition with a Gentile, this entire discussion is irrelevant, as there's never a Ribis prohibition transgressed. So you can go over to your Gentile neighbor and tell him, here, take this check for $100 and give me $90. Or your Gentile neighbor can go to you and say, take this check for $100, give me $90. And it makes no difference if it's considered Ribis or not, or if the check is considered purchased by him or not. If the kinyan actually worked, either way, this is all valid. And the question only begins when both parties are Jews, meaning the buyer of the debt and the seller of the debt, in which an Isser of Ribis applies. So after that important clarification, let's now begin. In general, a debt can be sold to a third party just like any other product, and the debt becomes acquired by him in exchange for whatever agreement was made, for whatever he had to give you in exchange for that debt, and now the debt is acquired by him and he gets to collect it. However, there are cases of exception in which we rule that the standard forms of acquisition are invalid, and in essence he doesn't acquire the debt. The first case is in a case that the debt is from a Gentile. For example, you lent $1,000 to your Gentile neighbor who gave you an IOU document signed to be paid in 6 months. You go over to your friend Reuven and say, listen, I need $900 right now. I'm willing to give you this debt of $1,000 to the guy that the guy owes me. Buy it from me for $900. So you're going to make $100 and I get my liquid cash right now. Is this permitted to be done? So a debt that is owed from a Gentile cannot be acquired by a third party. And if so, it ends up that if you do this, what ends up happening? Reuven, your friend, gave you $900, and the day he collects the debt from the Gentile, it's as if he's collecting it from you, so he's now collecting $1,000 in exchange for the $900, which is clear Ribis. And therefore, the only option in such a case where the debt is owned by a Gentile is for the Jew who is selling the debt, tells the buyer, his friend Reuven, that he forgives the loan completely from the guy. So Allah, it's as if the guy doesn't owe him anything anymore. And now Reuven, when he collects $1,000 from the guy, it no longer has any connection to his friend who he bought it from. And it's not considered Ribis. Goes without saying that in such a case, if the guy refuses to pay, Reuven can't go back to his friend and say, hey, the deal's off. Give me back my $900. A second case where an acquisition may be an issue is if the debt is not documented but was an oral debt, no contract. In such a case, it's only considered halachically acquired by a third party in what's called maimed shlushtan, which means that the seller, who was the lender, the buyer, which is the third party, and the original borrower, the loiver, are all present at the same time when this agreement is done. Only then can the loan be acquired. If one did not do this by an oral loan, an oral debt, all three people weren't there, then the debt is not considered acquired at all. And if the third party gave you less money for the debt than the debt originally can be collected for, it's considered ribis when he then collects the full amount. Now let's go to our classical case. The buyer of the debt is a Jew, the seller of the debt is a Jew, and the debt is from a Jew. And it's all documented, such as in the classical case of Reuven gave a post-dated check to Shimon, and now Shimon wants cash right away, and he wants to sell this check to Levi. So in such a case, selling the check is valid, and it's even allowed to be sold for a lower price. So Levi can give me $900 in exchange for my $1,000 post-dated check. However, in order to avoid the issue of ribis, I have to remove all liability from this amount. Meaning that Levi's taking a risk that if Reuven never pays him the $1,000, he can never come back to me. This was a pure purchase, an investment, a risk. It's his decision. However, for the Jew who's selling the debt to retain liability that he'll pay him back the original $900 if it doesn't go through, that is considered ribis and is completely invalid. Practically, this enters us into a big problem with check cashing services which are owned by Jews. And if I want to give them a post-dated check and receive money now, they casually take they give a lower amount of the check, especially if it's post-dated, and they make you retain liability on the check, which is considered ribis according to halach and is forbidden to be done. To summarize all the cases, if you have an IOU document or a check written to you by another person, you're allowed to sell that to a third party for even a lower amount, meaning you're getting cash now in exchange for giving him the ability to collect more cash at a later date. Although in such a case that you're receiving a lower amount of money from the buyer than the original amount that he will collect, then if the buyer is a Jew, you must avoid the ribis prohibition by making sure that it's a valid acquisition, such as if it's an oral loan, you do a maimet shlosh in front of all three parties, or if it's a documented loan from a Gentile, you forgive the loan, while if it's from a Jew, then nothing has to be done at all. And number two, that if you're selling it to a Jew, you cannot retain liability on that amount on the contract, and it's the buyer's risk of whether he'll be able to collect it or not.
Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com. Our free services of making Torah knowledge available to the public depends on donors like you. Please help us continue our work through making even a small contribution at www.shulchanaruchharav.com under the Daily Halacha Dedication section or in the subscription page. Also, check out our online courses and many sefarim available for purchase that will both enhance your Torah knowledge and help support our work.